The hall is a sea of ink and sweat. Hundreds of young men in Song-era China hunch over bamboo desks, scratching characters onto bamboo strips in hopes of passing the civil service exams. Outside, vendors whisper, "Success is everything." Inside, there is only concentration and the knowledge that these exams can lift one family for generations. One candidate's family carries that burden. His father has mortgaged land to support years of study. His mother and sister spin silk late into the night to buy paper and food. This is not only a story about a test, but about how entire households commit to the promise of power through education. Half a world away, and nearly a millennium later, a cramped New York tenement comes into view. A seamstress stitches shirts until dawn, her wages barely covering rent. In the street, Chinese workers line up to board trains that will carry them to mines and railway camps, only to be met by laws that will later restrict Chinese laborers and make re-entry extremely difficult. Across town, a black steelworker navigates Jim Crow segregation while risking his life in a furnace. The lives of the scholar's family, the seamstress, the Chinese workers, and the steelworker intersect in surprising ways. Behind every law or reform, behind every statistic about wealth or inequality, there are human beings making decisions and bearing consequences. On another continent, in Tokugawa, Japan, a samurai's wife kneels at a hearth, calculating rice yields and planning her children's futures. When reforms commute her husband's stipend to bonds, she must decide whether to keep running the small shop or invest in her son's schooling. Her choices, like those of the seamstress and the scholar, reveal how power, inequality, and agency intertwine. Questions emerge from these scenes. Who has the power to shape society? How do unequal structures dictate the options people see? And when history offers a choice, how do ordinary individuals and extraordinary leaders respond? Those questions serve as a compass for the journey across time and place. This is Critical Scrolls, and these are the structures that bind us, and the choices that break through them. Episodes 1 and 2 showed that grand narratives of rise and fall often fail. Civilizations do not collapse according to neat cycles. Each case is shaped by context, choices, and chance. This episode shifts the focus. Instead of asking why societies fail, it asks how power, inequality, and agency interact within and across civilizations. Familiar theories about bureaucracies, wars, capital, and class return, but this time to show how they shape who gets to act, who must comply, and who can resist. Two foundational ideas frame this analysis: Max Weber's forms of authority and Michael Mann's sources of power. Weber distinguished between traditional authority, rational legal authority, and charismatic authority. Mann broke power down into four sources: ideological, economic, military, and political. Added to these are Walter Scheidel's violent leveling thesis and Joseph Tainter's theory of complexity and diminishing returns. Together, these ideas illuminate how structures of power and inequality intersect with gender, race, and class, shaping the conditions in which human agency emerges. The narrative moves from Song China's exam halls to Gilded Age factories and Tokugawa and Meiji households. Each case deepens the understanding of how cultural values, economic structures, and state policies create opportunities, or trap people in roles they cannot easily escape. Emperors, activists, household managers, and workers all operate within these structures, sometimes reinforcing them, sometimes redirecting history. Power and inequality appear starkly in moments of crisis and reflection. After the conquest of Kalinga, Ashoka, emperor of the Mauryan Empire, stands atop a battlefield strewn with bodies. Legend holds that this horror compelled him to renounce further conquest. Ashoka carved edicts into pillars that urged compassion, tolerance, and just rule. His conversion shows how an individual, confronted with the costs of violence, can choose a different path. Yet, Ashoka ruled within an inherited system. His authority was both charismatic and grounded in tradition. His edicts still required a bureaucratic apparatus to implement. That apparatus did not abolish inequality, but it temporarily changed the balance between coercion and ideology. Behind such moments stand deeper frameworks. Weber's analysis emphasizes that legitimacy is not inherent. It's grounded in tradition, rules, or charisma. Mann's IEMP model underscores that no single source of power is sufficient. Ideological narratives can justify rule, but without economic resources or military backing, they falter. Armies can conquer, but without administrative capacity, they cannot govern. Douglas North and Barry Weingast's concept of natural states, where elite coalitions limit access to maintain rents, and open access orders, where entry is broader and competition is institutionalized, builds on Mann by showing how elites may willingly curtail violence when doing so secures their privileges. Thomas Piketty's inequality logic adds an economic dimension. When the rate of return on capital exceeds the rate of economic growth, wealth inherited from the past grows faster than income from labor, entrenching inequality. Scheidel cautions that, historically, large reductions in inequality often follow shocks: wars, revolutions, collapses, and pandemics. Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson argue that institutions can be inclusive, broad participation and secure property rights, or extractive, narrow elites monopolize power. Each framework offers a lens. Taken together, they depict power as multidimensional, inequality as structural but alterable, and agency as emerging at points where structures intersect with individual choice. The theme of elite overproduction illustrates this interplay. In the Abbasid Caliphate, too many elites and too few positions destabilized the state, fueling military slave uprisings. In Song China, a different form of overproduction emerged. Literati families invested heavily in their sons' education, swelling the ranks of exam candidates while the number of official positions remained fixed. The result was factional infighting rather than open revolt. The same basic pattern, more aspirants than offices, played out differently depending on institutional context. Nuance is essential to avoid turning such patterns into a new kind of deterministic cycle. Mechanisms, fiscal systems, elite coalitions, and forms of violence structure power and constrain or enable agency. It's 1890 in post-Civil War Alabama. A black man, arrested for vagrancy, merely standing idle, is convicted and sentenced to hard labor. He is leased to a private coal mine where he and hundreds of others are forced to work in conditions likened to slavery. Nearby, a local politician distributes sacks of coal to immigrant families, asking for votes in return. Extraction, taking labor or resources in ways people cannot freely resist through coerced labor and patronage networks, operates side by side. In Song China, extraction took the form of state monopolies on salt and tea, supplemented by paper money. The government sold salt at a markup, using proceeds to finance wars and pay tributes to the Liao and Jin. Taxation in kind, with grain, labor, persisted, but monetization increased with economic growth. The exam system created a cadre of scholar officials who served as tax collectors and judges, but also wrote essays questioning imperial policies. Their commitment to Confucian principles served as an ideological check on despotism. Tokugawa Japan relied on a different suite of mechanisms. Following the Battle of Sekigahara, the shogunate implemented the Sankin Kotai, alternate attendance system. Daimyo were required to keep their families in Edo as hostages and to spend alternate years at court, traveling with large entourages. This system drained provincial treasuries while stimulating commerce along the highways. It prevented rebellion not only by exhausting coffers, but also by binding the elite through ritual and spectacle. Economic growth followed, as did enormous debt. Samurai incomes, fixed in rice, lost purchasing power as prices rose. Merchants amassed wealth but lacked formal status, creating tension between economic and social hierarchies. Across these cases, shared pressures appear. Rulers require revenue and legitimacy. They extract through taxes, monopolies, coerced labor, or land rents. Elites cultivate patronage and clientelism to secure loyalty. When the cost of maintaining elite coalitions rises, states may centralize, as Charles Tilly observed. War makes states, and states make war, or fragment. The interplay between extraction and legitimacy is a near constant, even as outcomes vary. A young girl in Song China, 10 years old, practices embroidery. Her brother studies Confucian classics to prepare for the exams. She practices fine needlework to prepare for marriage. Their mother calculates how much silk the household must produce to pay taxes and finance her son's education. She weighs whether foot binding, newly popular among the elite, will improve her daughter's marriage prospects or hinder her ability to work. This household microcosm reveals how power and inequality intersect with gender. The civil service exam system represented a shift from aristocratic privilege to meritocratic veneer. By anonymizing scripts and recopying handwriting, the state attempted to curb nepotism. Yet only men from landholding families could afford decades of study. Daughters were often used to strengthen kin alliances through marriages. Some families took in concubines to produce heirs. Women's labor, spinning silk, weaving cloth, managing dowries, financed sons' studies, and sustained extended kin networks. For widows, Confucian moralists popularized the idea that starving was preferable to remarriage, policing women's bodies and reproduction. This gendered division of labor aligns with Piketty's inequality logic. Returns on capital accrue when a family can invest in education and maintain property. In Song China, investing in a son's education was a capital investment. Weaving and foot-binding were strategies to secure better marital matches for daughters. Inequality was reproduced not only through wealth, but through gendered social norms. In North and Weingast's terms, Song China functioned as a natural state. Access to political office was limited to gentry families. Mann's framework highlights that economic dynamism outpaced political power. Private merchants, excluded from formal office, formed partnerships that fueled urban growth. Tainter's notion of complexity appears in the sprawling bureaucratic apparatus that maintained paper money, salt monopolies, and exam systems. The cost of this complexity strained resources when the Jurchen invaded. Scheitel's violent leveling lurked on the horizon. Only when the Mongols toppled the dynasty did inequality collapse, at tremendous human cost. Within this context, the mother's decisions to bind her daughter's feet, to work nights, to mortgage fields, are acts of agency constrained by structures of inequality. The son's journey to the exam hall in the opening scenes depends on the invisible labor of women, the macroeconomy of salt monopolies and paper money, and the ideological power of Confucianism. At the turn of the 20th century in the United States, power and inequality appear most clearly through intertwined stories. A Chinese immigrant named Li arrives in San Francisco in 1874. He helps build the Transcontinental Railroad, sending wages back to a village in Guangdong. When the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 is passed, it restricts immigration of Chinese laborers and makes re-entry extremely difficult. Li is effectively unable to bring his wife or children to America. His absence fractures his family, and the law cements race as an economic boundary. Some immigrants with special return certificates were technically allowed back, but those narrow provisions were inconsistently enforced. In Memphis, Ida B. Wells, a black journalist, documents lynchings and demands justice. Her article exposes how convict leasing and sharecropping resurrect slavery under another name. She organizes boycotts and writes exposés showing that black women wield agency even within oppressive systems. In New York, the seamstress from the opening scenes attends a union meeting where suffragists speak about voting rights. She realizes that without political power, working conditions cannot meaningfully improve. Her participation links gender, race, and class struggles. These vignettes illustrate how the Gilded Age political economy cannot be separated from race and gender. Piketty's R greater than G formula is evident. The top 1% owned a quarter of assets, while millions labored for subsistence. Inequality was enforced not only by wealth but also by law. Jim Crow disenfranchised black citizens and mandated segregation. Convict leasing criminalized black life and generated revenue for states. Sharecropping bound freed people and poor whites to plantations, often leaving them indebted at year's end. Corporate law evolved in ways that enabled concentration. The creation of the modern corporation, limited liability, and trust structures allowed Standard Oil and U.S. Steel to dominate industries. Acemoglu and Robinson would describe these as extractive institutions. Elites shaped laws to entrench their advantages. North and Weingast's notion of an open access order existed in aspiration, but in practice, access was constrained by race, gender, and class. Mann's ideological power appears in social Darwinism and the gospel of wealth, which justified disparities as natural and moral. Scheitel's violent leveling is visible in the Civil War, which ended slavery, but was followed by re-enslavement through law and violence, limiting its equalizing effect. Unlike Song China, where economic growth came from internal commerce and state monopolies, the United States harnessed corporate law and continental expansion. Weak regulatory capacity allowed trusts to flourish. At the same time, the democratic system provided space for social movements. Suffragists, labor unions, populists, and progressive reformers pushed for antitrust laws, income taxes, and child labor restrictions. Through activism, women and racial minorities asserted agency, shaping policies and societal norms. In Tokugawa, Japan, power and inequality take shape inside homes as well as the court. In a merchant family's house in Osaka, the household head is away in Edo, fulfilling alternate attendance duties, where the daimyo were politically obligated to alternate their residence between their domain and Edo according to a strict schedule. His wife, daughter-in-law, and concubine manage the shop. They track profits, navigate samurai credit accounts, and enforce sumptuary laws. Their daily work shows how women in merchant families acted as economic agents within a patriarchy that valued male lineage. Tokugawa peace rested on hierarchical order. Traditional authority vested power in the shogun. Ideological power drew on Neo-Confucian ethics. Economic power increasingly accumulated in merchant hands. Military power among daimyo was deliberately curtailed. This balance created a stable but rigid system. A clear example of a natural state with limited access. Over time, economic dynamism strained the order. Merchant wealth and samurai debt produced a status inversion. Peasants began to control fertility and hold back daughters from marriage to conserve resources. Literacy rose, enabling circulation of popular literature and floating world culture. These developments mattered when external pressures arrived. When Commodore Matthew Perry's black ships appeared in 1853, Japan's leaders faced a crisis: open the country and risk colonization, or resist and faced overwhelming firepower. Anti-Bakufu activists rallied around the slogan Sonu Jooi, meaning revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, blending xenophobia with concern for national sovereignty. The Meiji Restoration abolished Tokugawa House and reorganized Japan. Samurai stipends were commuted to bonds, and feudal domains were transferred into prefectures. A national conscript army was created. The government encouraged factory construction and hired foreign experts. Meiji-era feminism emerged amid these transformations. Women like Kishida Toshiko demanded education and political rights, arguing that the good wife, wise mother ideal masked male dominance. The 1898 Civil Code codified patriarchal norms. Women needed their husband's consent to own property. Household heads controlled family members' residence. At the same time, education for girls expanded, and women entered textile mills, enduring harsh conditions. The separation of home and work deepened gender roles, but also created spaces for female solidarity. A young mill worker in Nagoya, writing secretly to a friend about poor wages and long hours, and drawing inspiration from Kishida's speeches, stands at the intersection of global debates on gender and labor. Comparisons with Song China and the Gilded Age United States reveal convergences and divergences. Japan's modernization was top-down and state-led, guided by Meiji oligarchs who read Western texts but also leveraged existing infrastructures. The United States expanded private power through corporate law. Japan fostered zaibatsu conglomerates but maintained stronger state oversight. Where Song China's economic dynamism clashed with military weakness, Meiji Japan built a modern army and navy. In gender terms, both Song China and Tokugawa Japan constrained women through ideology. But in Japan, modernization created new roles that women contested directly. Multiple frameworks converge in the cases we've examined so far. Weber's types of authority, Mann's IEMP model, North and Weingast's natural versus open orders, and Acemoglu and Robinson's inclusive versus extractive institutions all speak to how power is organized. Piketty and Scheidel offer models of inequality and leveling. Tilley, Tainter, and Fukuyama contribute insights on state formation, complexity, and political decay. Grouping these theories clarifies what they reveal and what they can't fully capture. On power and authority, Weber's traditional, rational legal, and charismatic types illuminate why subjects accept rule. Mann's IEMP model, North and Weingast's natural versus open orders, and Acemoglu and Robinson's institutional dichotomy describe how power is structured and constrained. Song China combined rational legal authority, exams, with a traditional Confucian moral order. Tokugawa Japan leaned heavily on traditional hierarchy. The Gilded Age United States championed rational legal rules, but tolerated de facto exclusions. Meiji Japan hybridized, adopting a constitution and parliament while maintaining imperial cult and patriarchal law. On inequality, Piketty's insight that R greater than G leads to entrenched wealth finds expression in industrial America as fortunes ballooned. In Song China, wealth was land and status-based. Growth rates were high, but benefits flowed mainly to gentry. In Tokugawa Japan, rice stipends lost purchasing power even as merchant capital grew. Meiji Japan initially maintained high inequality until wartime destruction and post-war reforms reduced it. Scheidel argues that only catastrophes produce dramatic leveling. The Mongol conquest, the US Civil War, and World War II exemplify this. Yet nonviolent leveling attempts appear as well. Progressive taxes and land reforms in the United States and Japan. Less dramatic, but still significant. On state formation and decay, Tilley's dictum that war builds states explain why Song China's relative peace limited its military capacity, while Meiji Japan's external threat catalyzed state building. The United States fought a civil war and world wars that expanded federal authority. Tainter's theory of complexity warns that growing administrative costs can become unsustainable. This helps explain the Song's fiscal strain and late Tokugawa's difficulty responding to inflation and external pressure. Fukuyama argues that balanced state capacity, rule of law, and accountability are required to avoid decay. In these cases, mismatches appear. Song China possessed legal and ideological structures, but lacked military accountability. Tokugawa Japan had strong social order, but weak fiscal capacity. The United States wielded immense economic power, but uneven accountability due to private influence and racism. Intersectionality of gender and race is central rather than peripheral. Foot binding and widow chastity regulated female bodies in Song China. Jim Crow and Chinese exclusion structured labor markets in the United States. Meiji Japan's civil code legally subordinated women while demanding their labor. Within these structures, individuals acted. The seamstress joined a union. Kishida Toshiko defied norms. Ashoka chose nonviolence. Kennedy chose diplomacy. These acts show that agency persists, even under constraint. The synthesis reveals patterns without falling into deterministic cycles. Elite overproduction takes different forms across societies. War can strengthen or destroy states depending on the context. Inequality is shaped by both structural returns on capital and legal or institutional barriers. Attending to these nuances helps avoid replacing one universal formula with another. Resilience, the capacity to adapt and avoid catastrophic inequality or collapse. appears in leaders, institutions, and ordinary lives. Ashoka and Kennedy illustrate moral leadership that redirects trajectories. Ashoka's renunciation of conquest contributed to a century of relative peace and cultural flourishing. Kennedy's decision to blockade rather than bomb Cuba averted nuclear war and led to communication protocols such as the Washington-Moscow hotline. In both cases, choices made by individuals in positions of power reduced violence and altered plausible futures. Byzantium offers an institutional example of endurance. Byzantine emperors collected substantial taxes and invested in fortifications, allowing the state centered on Constantinople to survive for centuries while the Western Roman Empire fell. Marriage alliances and religious legitimacy helped integrate diverse populations. Inequality persisted, but catastrophic leveling was delayed until the final Ottoman conquest. In contrast, Song China succumbed to Mongol conquest after prolonged fiscal and military strain. Resilience requires more than war-making capacity. It rests on fiscal and ideological adaptability. Nordic social democracy provides a modern case of nonviolent leveling. In the mid-20th century, Sweden and its neighbors implemented progressive taxation and welfare programs that reduced inequality while maintaining growth. These reforms were facilitated by cohesive societies, strong unions, and ideological commitments to social solidarity. Though outside the main set of case studies, they show that inclusive institutions and progressive taxation can temper inequality without catastrophe, complicating Scheidl's emphasis on violent leveling. Resilience also emerges in ordinary lives. The descendants of the Song weaver migrate south after the Jurchen invasion, adapt to a commercial economy, and continue weaving. The seamstress in New York sees her wages rise after union victories and the 40-hour week becomes law. The Meiji mill worker takes evening classes, and her daughter becomes a teacher. None of these outcomes are guaranteed, but each illustrates how systemic changes and personal agency interact to produce more livable futures. In the 21st century, new forms of power, inequality, and agency take shape. Digital platforms such as Amazon and Alibaba combine ideological, economic, and political power. They shape information flows, marketplaces, and even regulatory debates. Returns on capital and technology far outpace average economic growth, echoing Piketty's concerns. Algorithms can entrench bias as job screening software discriminates against women or minorities. At the same time, digital spaces enable activism. Movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and global climate strikes coordinate across borders, pressuring corporations and governments. Environmental pressures evoke themes associated with Tilly and Tainter. Climate change functions both as an external threat and an internal strain. Extreme weather damages infrastructure. Rising seas displace communities. Resource conflicts intensify. States must invest in new forms of complexity. Renewable energy, climate adaptation, but risk diminishing returns if they can't mobilize resources or maintain legitimacy. Mann's IEMP model helps explain the emerging mismatch. Economic and ideological power increasingly operate on a global scale, while political and military power remain mostly national, complicating governance. Intersectionality remains central. Women, indigenous peoples, and marginalized groups bear disproportionate burdens of climate change and economic disruption, but they also lead movements for justice. A teenage climate activist from Uganda whose village experiences drought speaks at the United Nations, challenging world leaders. Her agency underscores that voice matters even when resources are unequal. Scheidl's warnings about pandemics manifested with COVID-19. The virus exposed and exacerbated inequality while also promoting debates about universal basic income, wealth taxes, and labor protections. Pandemic deaths temporarily affected global distributions of wealth and income, but the long-term impact on inequality remains uncertain. The central challenge is to harness crises for inclusive reform rather than further entrenchment of elites. Lessons from Song China, the Gilded Age United States, and Tokugawa Meiji Japan resonate in this context. Investment in education without shifts in gender roles reproduces inequality. Industrial growth without regulatory capacity empowers monopolies. Modernization without inclusive politics perpetuates patriarchal and racial hierarchies. The digital age demands vigilance to ensure that new forms of power remain accountable and that returns on capital do not outstrip social and political progress. Across these cases, power, inequality, and agency continually interact. Power proves multifaceted, arising from ideology, economics, military force, and political institutions that reinforce or counterbalance one another. Inequality emerges as structural, shaped by returns on capital and institutional barriers. Yet it is not immutable. Policies, movements, and crises can widen or narrow disparities. Agency persists within constraints. Mothers binding feet, seamstresses striking, samurai wives managing businesses, emperors renouncing violence, presidents avoiding war. Each contributes to redirections in history's course. Understanding the past requires both macro frameworks and micro stories. Theories reveal patterns. Personal narratives show how these patterns are lived. Shifts between intimate vignettes and structural analysis keep the intellectual thread active while grounding it in human experience. History does not prescribe the future. It offers a library of strategies and cautionary tales, examining how past societies confronted power and inequality clarifies what's at stake in present choices. Whether through policy, organizing, or individual decisions, people participate in the human engine that drives history. If you've made it this far, and if you found meaning in this journey, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It helps others discover the series, and it helps support the next chapter of Critical Scrolls. Thank you for watching.